I'm Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. Happy Tuesday, and welcome to the weekly video in which I run my mouth on whatever happens to be bothering me about what's going on in our society. Now, like many people who may be watching this video, I am also watching what's going on in the world, and I've been doing my best to understand all of the whys and the wherefores of it. And this includes trying to understand people's reactions, specifically why people have allowed so much insanity to go unchecked. My theory is that this comes down to three roots: complacency, conformity, and cowardice. And the behaviors we are seeing with people letting themselves be walked all over upon are really outgrowths of these things. If society and even our individual lives are to move forward in a productive direction, it will be necessary to get past all three of these roots. Let's start with complacency. Dictionary.com defines complacency as either a feeling of quiet pleasure or security, or often while unaware of some potential danger, defect, and the like, self-satisfaction or smug satisfaction within an existing situation, condition, etc. AKA the syndrome of sticking your head in the sand like an ostrich and ignoring what's happening around you. Complacency is often disguised as not overreacting or accepting that there's always something troubling going on in the world. That doesn't mean civilization's under threat. And, you just don't want to get involved with other people's problems, and you don't think this will really affect you anyway. That's complacency. And then that's when people, retreat to their homes and their grills and how they're decorating for Christmas this year. Very mundane, everyday concerns because they don't want to deal with the larger issues. That is complacency. Now, the consequence of indulging in complacency is that you will be ignoring all warning signs to the point that you may find yourself refusing to recognize that there's a threat to yourself, your family, or your way of life until that threat is literally knocking on your door and dragging you away. Breaking out of complacency requires that you assume responsibility for looking out after your own interests and acknowledging that what happens in the wider community has the potential to affect you. It also requires wisdom and becoming a student of history, acknowledging that patterns of ideas that turn into behaviors that become events, and through this process, learning to tell the difference between the usual level of conflict that's going to exist in any society, and then when there are serious problems that they become more harmful the longer it's ignored, and they have an intense and intrinsically destabilizing effect. So that's complacency. Now this brings us to conformity. Again, we go to dictionary.com. Action in accord with prevailing social standards, attitudes, practices, etc. Also known as caving into peer pressure, whether or not your peers have your best interest at heart or indeed have any sensible ideas or motivations. Now, for all the claptrap we see about being an individual and living your truth, the reality is that the vast majority of people are conformists. The NPC meme exists for a reason. Even when people go out of their way to be different, they end up thinking, looking, and speaking like others who were attracted to the same fad, became part of the same tribe, and so they're all different in essentially the exact same way. So, given that the tendency to conform is somewhat innate in human nature, I think this highlights the importance that cultural and social norms really play in our society and in our own lives. And we need to make an effort to ensure that these norms are beneficial, not detrimental. Now, for example, let's say the norm is that it's expected that people will go to work, they will pay their bills on time, they will get married, they will have children, they will care about each other, they will be good neighbors. Then that society is probably going to be in a relatively decent state. However, if the norm, by contrast, is, you don't have to work, bills are really the problem for people you hate who are oppressing you anyway, don't settle down with anybody, don't limit your options, kids will destroy your life, so you better not have those, and you don't have to think about anyone else because it's all about you and you're perfect exactly the way that you are. Well, we have daily proof about what that looks like and the hideous effect it has both to individuals and to society as a whole. This is why it's vital to take responsibility for ourselves and take a hard look at what influences are promoted and popularized in our society and judge whether or not that's a good thing. We can refuse to be swept up in the current, and we have the obligation to actively counter self-destructive narratives, not just in the vein of being a good citizen, but simply as a matter of self-preservation. Now, last but not at all least, cowardice. Again, we go to dictionary.com. It defines cowardice as lack of courage to face danger, difficulty, opposition, or pain, aka running away from your problems instead of facing them. We live in an age of cowardice in which the idea is running rampant that if you're afraid or you have something to lose, then that somehow frees you of the obligation to do what you know to be right. This hasn't occurred by accident. It suits the purposes of authoritarians of all stripes and in all fields: government, media, business, religion, any big overarching institution. They benefit from cowardice. And they need people to be cowards because that makes it so much easier to remain in power. Because if people are cowardly, they're not going to mount an effective opposition to you. You're not going to be called to account for any of your deeds. So that works out really well for the tyrants in society. And that is exactly the kind of group that I see no benefit in obliging whatsoever. Now this brings me to two other related C words: can't and cost. When people claim that they can't stand up for themselves or for others or for a moral principle, it doesn't mean that they're actually incapable of doing so. What it means is that they are choosing not to act because they have decided that the cost is too high. And deep down, people who do this tend to believe that maybe the worst won't actually happen to them. If they just keep their heads down, go with the flow, that sort of thing. History shows us time and again that this simply isn't true, and the longer you wait, the more likely you are to suffer, and if you finally do act, the cost will be far higher in the end than it would have been in the beginning, when you stood a better chance of being successful and faced little more than social disapproval for a time. But yet, so many people, they delay the moment of finally finding a spine and taking a stand. They postpone that as far as what they're able to do, and then they can't figure out why other people who've already taken a stand and have banded together with others in an effort to have a good effect on society, about why they're so resented by them. Gosh, gee, it's almost as if other people came to this conclusion earlier in life, made the sacrifices, faced their fears, decided to be brave, and the cowards are just now starting to catch up. So this is why there's really no excuse for any of us to evade responsibility. Just because we didn't want or ask for a situation to occur, it doesn't mean that we don't have the duty to deal with it when it arises. We've got to find our courage, and we've got to exercise it the way we would a muscle, so that we become more equal to facing difficult challenges, and so that we're actually helpful to people who are a little more prone, perhaps a little bit more independently minded, perhaps people who are just accustomed to facing their fears the way that they've already done, and being helpful to them rather than dragging down their efforts. So when we look at these things, whether it's complacency, conformity, or cowardice, it all comes down to assuming personal responsibility, doesn't it? We've got to get to work, deal with what's in front of us, stop making excuses for ourselves, stop trying to farm out the work for somebody else to do, and stop pretending that it isn't our personal job to face down the crazy world and tell it no. I will not comply. You can be crazy by yourself. I'm not going to help you. I do not have to participate in it. So this begins with our frame of mind. Thoughts become deeds. If we build ourselves up mentally, it becomes easier for us to act honorably. And hopefully that's what you've gotten out of this. So let me know what you think, either in the comment section or on our Discord group, Blackbird's Brew. There's a link to join in the description box below. Just click on it. It'll take you right there, and I would love to hear from you. But I think that's it for today. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.